So again, hello, bonjour, good afternoon, and most importantly, a really warm welcome to this KDE webinar. And we're just really happy to have you join us this afternoon. My name is Colleen McMillan, and I am the KDE Hub Scientific Co-Director, along with my colleague, Dr. Alice Schmidt-Hambich. Hi, Alice. And of course, the other members of the KDE Hub team are present with us today as well. So before we begin, just to let you know that this webinar will be recorded, and that's our usual practice. And we will be following up with a summary and the slides from today's event for you. So throughout the session, please feel free. We encourage you to participate, post your questions, post your comments in the chat, and we will have a member of our team that's monitoring the chat, and we'll bring those questions to our guest speakers. So please, at any time, feel free to do that. I'm going to start off with a land acknowledgement, just to ground us in the importance of our shared spaces and commitments. So we here at Renison University College, we're located on the traditional territory of the Nudra, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples, and that we are situated on what is called the Haldeman Tract, which is land promised to the Six Nations. That's 6 miles on either side of the Grand River. So our active work toward reconciliation takes place across our campus and at the Hub through our research, our unlearning, and then our learning, our teaching, our community building, and outreach. And we humbly acknowledge and are grateful for the spaces created for us to learn about Indigenous knowledges, and that's plural, and wisdom, in addition to the intergenerational harms caused by colonization. And we invite you to do your own journey. So for those of you who are not familiar with our guest presenters, the Center for Community-Based Research, also known shortly as CCBR, yes, another acronym, they are housed also at the University of Waterloo, and conduct and promote research that is community-driven, participatory, and action-oriented to advance equity and social innovation. And the team at CCBR, they really work hard to create awareness, policies, translate those policies into practices that advance equitable participation that is also inclusive of all community members. And a little fun fact for you, I think it's really noteworthy that CCBR has been doing this work since 1982. So a huge congratulations goes out to them. It's not easy work. And among many things I think that this speaks to, aside from their longevity, are their really deep connections with the community and positive and sustainable collaboration with many, many partners. After the presentation, if you're further interested, I would encourage you to visit their website to appreciate the incredible work that they have done, again, over the past 4 decades. It's a really easy website, all one word, communitybasedresearch.ca. So we have our 2 colleagues with us from CCBR, Hanny and Lisa, and they are going to provide several frameworks and strategies that can help foster those deeper relationships by investing in collective trust building within both your project and your community, which, as you know, is a key component in the Icelandic prevention model. After their presentation, we're going to have a few housekeeping items that will be shared by Alice, including some upcoming Hub events. And of course, as always, as our practice, we invite you to share your comments or any kind of feedback on how we did today. We aim to wrap up by or just before 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So on that note, I'm going to hand the webinar over to Hanny and Lisa, who will provide a short self introduction and then start their presentation. And then we will be having a brief question and answer period. So over to you, Hanny and Lisa.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Colleen, for this nice and kind introduction. My name is Hani Sadati. I'm a senior researcher at the Center for Community-Based Research, as Colleen mentioned, and I'm happy that I'm here with my colleague, Lisa. I'll let Lisa introduce herself, and then I'll continue.
Hi, everyone. Yes, pleasure to meet you, and thank you, Colleen, for that wonderful introduction about CCBR. Honey, I don't know if you want to put up on the screen our little highlights about CCBR there, but
Yeah.
just to say, we, as Colleen mentioned, we have been working for a long time across a wide variety of projects, but substance use health and youth engagement are two areas of expertise for our organization, and we're really grateful to have this relationship with the KDE Hub through our shared campus, supporting their work with the co-development of some research projects and learning resources. Maybe I'll just give you a bit of an overview of our plan for the day. We have essentially three main sections to this webinar that we want to address. The first one is just to think about how to build trust in community projects by looking at definitions that are core to our understanding. And then we'll move on to talk about principles of community engagement that we feel are necessary to fostering trust and that we use to guide our work at CCBR. And lastly, we want to talk about a variety of practices that enable us to act on or fulfill those principles. And we believe will also be relevant to you in your activities. And then in between each of these three sections of our meeting today, we're going to stop and reflect on the content and have a bit of a discussion. But at the end, there'll be a 20-minute small group discussion where we can go a little bit more in depth and give all of you more of a sustained opportunity to consider the relevance of these ideas and how to potentially apply them in your work. So to recap, our purpose, what we hope to take away from today is an improved understanding of how community engagement requires developing trusting relationships, what guiding principles of community engagement foster trust in those relationships, and how to practice those principles. And we're doing that because the deeper you engage people, the more you have to be attuned to trust and its power dynamics at both an interpersonal and interorganizational level. So yeah, let's just start by briefly considering some core definitions that help us to think through the challenge of building trust in communities. Community engagement is the first that we pause on and think, okay, what do we mean when we speak about community engagement? What are we doing? A basic definition we wanted to share with you, right? It's working collaboratively with people who share some kind of common ground. Hopefully we're in agreement about this, to catalyze change. So there's a change goal in policies, programs, and practices, for instance. Importantly, those who are closest to the issue, the place, or the opportunity are ideally central to this collaboration because that helps to build capacity amongst that group, cohesion as a community, and accountability into the collaboration. And then we just wanted to share this schema with you. Some of you may have seen it before, or a version of it that is quite popular. And it just recognizes that there are degrees of community engagement. It doesn't always look the same. There are varying degrees to which communities can be engaged with. So 5 types are kind of captured in this scheme. Or forms that engagement can take. The initiative as a whole that you're engaged in, or any of the specific activities within it, may fall anywhere on this continuum. So we're moving from inform, which of course relates to just sort of sharing information, consulting, which is about trying to gather some feedback or some information from others, involving, which means that they're more actively concerned with really being involved in the whole process of the engagement and the purpose and the outcome and the initiative as a whole. And then we move towards the latter end of the continuum where we're increasingly reflecting, moving sort of leadership and authority into the hands of the community that we're intending to engage with. So there's a greater degree of deep collaboration and partnership that happens at that end. And one might argue can lead to more empowering outcomes. So within any given initiative or project or organization, there may be times at which the engagement moves along this continuum. It can move back and forth or jump around. And I think one other moment I just wanted to say, one other comment I had documented here was that we also have to consider the degree to which the community we wish to engage with wants to participate in that engagement. And it's not necessarily up to those of us who are thinking about initiating or expanding some kind of undertaking, that it's also about what works for those we hope to foster a relationship with. And getting that right, not over-promising or under-delivering, is an important part of building trust. So I wanted to flag that. Even informing people with breadth and depth at the left side of this continuum can be very challenging and require the development of trust. But it's a necessary step if you want to engage them more deeply. So the process this continuum represents, it isn't necessarily going to move from left to right, although that's possible. Processes of engagement are rarely linear and tidy. And really before we can really think about moving through this, we have to think about laying the groundwork, which brings us to think more deeply in this discussion today about what it means to create trust. So let's move on from there.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And now we would like to we would love to hear from you. This is what we've planned for a quick activity to continue thinking about community engagement. So we would ask everyone, please take a moment to share one way you engage with communities in your work. This is a Slido activity. You might be familiar with that. There is no right and wrong answer here, and this is anonymous. You can join by scanning the QR code on the screen, or going to slido.com and entering the event code that you see on the screen. We'll take about 1 to 2 minutes for this, and participation is completely voluntary. So feel free to join if you're comfortable. So we will see the insights live on the screen after I see two participants are typing. Three participants are typing. Yeah, initiating a needs assessment. Okay, this is one way this participant engages with the community. Be humble and own what you don't know. Town halls or community forums to learn about their needs and visions. Yeah, these are good ways of engaging communities to learn from the community, to get their insight, to involve their voices. These are great. I'm seeing 5 participants are still typing, so I'll wait for maybe 1 more minute. Yeah, working together to achieve goals. Yeah, so this is, you can be more specific about the method of engaging the community. Sit with them in existing events instead of presenting, to learn and have a conversation first. Thank you. Yeah, this is great. Engage in community tables to increase collaboration across agencies, host community meetings to share plant use survey results, bring food for people. That's great. That's that's really nice. In the meetings, and thank you gifts. In case someone shares a lot of perspective, establishing a community coalition, engage with committee about their needs and work together with them, finding champions and knowledge holders in the community. I love that it's already connected with the IPM model. That's great. I see one participant is typing. So after we have that, I'll pass the, I'll move to, to the next slide, just to have a chance to see what this participant is sharing with us. Mm. Okay, establish funded coalition with the collaborative governance model. Okay, yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for this great participation. I'll move forward with the rest of the slides for now. So now we have, we have an idea of how people are thinking about the ways of engaging communities. So I would like to continue the conversation about the goals, the why behind community engagement. Why are we engaging with the community? Why do we hope to achieve? So this slide offers another perspective on engagement goals developed by Capire Consulting Group, an Australian company specializing in community engagement. It's called the engagement triangle, as you see on the screen, which highlights three core purposes of engagement, which are informing decisions, strengthening relationships, and building capacity. These goals might overlap with the ones that Lisa shared in the engagement continuum, but we wanted to offer this as an alternative, more non-linear way of thinking about engagement. So while we won't have time to fully unpack the triangle here, we invite you to reflect on it and consider where your own projects might sit within this framework, this triangle. So here are the 10 core steps of the IPM, familiar table for everyone, I think, here. Many of you already, or all of you are already familiar with it. We want to highlight that community engagement is woven throughout the IPM model. It's explicitly emphasized, though, in step 3 and 5, but it could play an implicit role across many of the other steps. It's also important to note that while the IPM model as a whole tends to lean toward the empower end of the engagement continuum that Lisa shared earlier, individual activities within the model can fall at different within different forms of the engagement continuum, depending on the context and the activity, of course.
Okay, so next we just want to touch briefly on definitions of power and trust. These definitions will help us to understand what we're striving to achieve through community engagement and relationship building. We're aiming for collaboration, and collaboration is relationship dependent. And we know that trust and the power dynamics that impact trust are foundational to those relationships. It really felt like we needed to take a moment to think about how we define power and trust to enable collaboration.
So, in terms of defining the trust, of course, there are lots of, I mean, there are different ways of defining trust in different contexts, in different ways. We've chosen to these two concepts of interpersonal trust and inter-organizational or organizational trust. Because we thought this could be more relevant for this conversation, for this webinar. So interpersonal trust, we mean trust between the individuals, and with organizational trust, with inter-organizational trust, it's about the extent to which the members of a focal organization trust, trust the members of the partner of a partner organization. So it's about because organizations, it doesn't make sense we talk about trust between organizations. It's about the core people who are driving the organization. They trust each other. In terms of the organizational trust itself, that's the individual's trust in multiple levels of an organization. So we hope these definitions can bring a little bit more clarity on what we mean by the trust.
Thanks, Hani. And we know that trust, or our expectations of one another at both interpersonal and interorganizational levels, is impacted by power. When we talk about power, we're talking about the capacity and the opportunity to fulfill or impede personal, relational, or collective needs. This is a definition we're drawing from Prelel-Tensky. And that I find very helpful because it captures both power from above and from below. And it relates power not only to influence, but to need explicitly. So just invite you to take a moment to just reflect on that, what it means to talk about power. Today, at least, we're talking about the capacity and the opportunity to fulfill or impede personal, relational, or collective needs. When parties of a relationship lack equal capacity and opportunity to fulfill needs, there is a power inequality that undermines trust because some have the capacity to disadvantage others. Conversely, those with power over others distrust those they fear might take their power and make them subordinate. So understandably, it's necessary to address and dismantle unequal power relations to build trust in collaboration. Okay, so reflecting on those definitions, we wanted to just make sure we're all on the same page. This is kind of core concepts, and we wanted to see, does this resonate with you? Are there other ways that you define trust that are important for our conversation today? Or any examples of times when power and trust have contributed to or detracted from your community engagement activities? Be those on the left or the right or the middle of the continuum we looked at. And when has that come into play for you? So yeah, we want to invite any comments on the definitions. Are they feeling familiar? Is there anything new there? Anything you'd like to add? Or just experiences where this is, you're encountering power dynamics and trust issues. I'm just going to open the floor. Feel
Maybe
free
I
to
can,
comment. Yeah,
I can
great.
just share, just
Thank
before I
you.
go. I found that trust has been challenging when asking for surveys. It's a, you've got to have a lot of trust with the communities that you're working with, the parents that you're working with. We work directly with parents as opposed to, and caregivers as opposed to through the school boards. And so when we're asking for surveys, as we move into, possibly the next stream and looking for surveys, we're already starting to have conversations around, making sure that there's going to be lots of lead time and lots of trust built and question time for them to ask with the surveys that are potentially coming if we are in stream 2. That's something to throw in there, add to the conversation.
That's great. Thank you. Time for questions. That's very valuable. And I see a hand from E. Taylor. You want to go ahead?
Hi, sir. It's Emily Taylor here from Peterborough Public Health. Yeah, I was just going to add to that comment because that really resonated. I think it was Ricardo speaking. And I think in our case, it's interesting because we have a really long-standing relationship with our local school board and great trust at multiple levels of the organization. But I think where we're struggling a bit right now is trust in Planet Youth in this survey that's coming from another organization. So we're, liaising with the school board based on our trust. But then when they're looking at the survey and some of the sensitive questions there, they're thinking, who created this survey, and they don't have that direct relationship. So we're kind of the third party representing this survey. And so that's kind of an interesting scenario, and just wanted to add that in case that resonates with anyone else.
Thank you for bringing that up. We see that a lot as well when we're working with sort of proxy organizations, or this often happens when you're building new relationships in a community. It's a familiar problem for sure. Crystal, you want to jump in?
I'm so sorry. I don't know how to raise a hand.
No problem.
Just speaking with Emily. So I am Planet Youth Calgary, and I know we're connecting with Peterborough, but the school boards. We had a very similar experience with our school boards in Calgary. The questions, trust as to why we're not using data that they've already collected. That's a huge thing. Like, they're like, why aren't you using everything that we've already done? And then I was interested in learning more from Ricardo about the survey. So maybe I can take that online, but wanted to learn more about how he's reaching through parents instead of schools, as schools are sometimes a barrier. So it would be really interesting to learn. I mean, I think building trust with the parents is complicated as well, but it could be another option if we're having trouble building trust with schools. So yes, that was it. Thank you.
That's great. So two important points there. One is, why this research intervention in particular when there is data, and then the other is building trust with a whole new audience. How are you reaching out to them? Let me see, are there anyone else want to jump in? Otherwise we can invite Ricardo to answer that question. Maybe others are interested as well. Ricardo, do you want to jump back in?
Sure. Okay. We've never had success with the school districts understanding the needs of our. We work with Indigenous young men, and school doesn't believe that if your bum's not in the chair, you're not learning. And so we never really formed a relationship with the school districts until now that they're learning on the land program finally exists after we've been running now for 10 years. And so that's why we formed a lot of trust with parents. And now we're approaching it in a way of, look, we've been around for 10 years doing this in different nations and spreading just grassroots by nations asking for support and what we're doing. And we just kind of share our mistakes as we go along. Over 10 years now of mistakes, it's pretty good. And so when we do that, though, we've got a lot of trust with the parents to understand that something different seems to be happening with the way this is approached. The youth are grabbing it. The youth are like, Andy's on the call, for goodness sakes, right? The youth are actually believing that something is different here. And so they speak to their parents speak to us. We all believe in this differently. So that's why they understand that. I've been asked by Island Health, for example, like, because we're on Vancouver Island, I've been asked by Island Health for like 2-3 years now of survey information. I'm like, well, I don't have time to do that. We're trying to be in the woods on the land and follow the seasons, harvesting yellow cedar, harvesting titans. And so it's not like the time isn't always there for us. So going through the youth and being able to have that community belief and buy-in that we need some data to back up what's actually happening now has really actually been helpful. And so that's our specific situation. We've been around for a long time, but we have nothing to show for it except engaged youth and a lot of cool partners. But we don't have any data, and that's kind of, yeah. Sorry if that. I hope that helps.
Right, so you're able to reach the parents because you have youth engagement already as part of your primary programming. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for jumping in there a little unexpectedly. And I'll go to you in a moment, David. I just wanted to recognize, I see some comments in the chat, which are also helpful. Others saying, yeah, how this problem about using existing data versus collecting new data, something we could talk about, and using a survey that comes from somewhere else, a third party, sometimes it seems questionable to some community partners. And then there's the issue of engaging youth more directly, and how we do that. Invite anyone to respond to those comments as well, but we'll make a note of them for now. David, did you want to jump on?
Sure. So I'm going to comment on all of those things. I think one of the places where that the 10 steps that you showed, the slide from the Icelandic prevention model, has a gap is around youth engagement. It talks about community, but most of what I read about when I first started learning about the IPM, it really talked more about adults and parents and caregivers. It really didn't talk a lot about youth, and I think that's an issue. And what I see from what we're trying to do in Lanark County, and what I see from other communities across Canada, is that at least in the Canadian perspective, we're trying to address that. And I would say that I see some of that in Iceland as well. Several of us on this call were at the Planet Youth Conference a year ago, March, and there were presentations from youth organizations, Icelandic-based youth organizations there. So I think their documentation needs to catch up. I wanted to talk a little bit about trust and school boards, and I think one of the things that my experience tells me, and this is also true from I'm retired now, but I worked in high tech and I was a product manager for a while, and we were always trying to make strategic sales to large corporations. And while you need to have it's table stakes to have that sort of organization to organization trust, it's really based on individuals. And so you really need to have individual connections with the right people and understand what's happening. So school boards are very important, and I think it behooves all of us to really, as much as possible, treat them like a strategic client, understand where their points of pain are, what it is they're trying to do, and how we can address that. I can say that I don't think it ever was an issue for us in our dealings with how come we're going to use a survey from outside of Canada. That really wasn't a problem. Part of the reason for that maybe is that early in our engagement with the school boards, we were able to have Alfgeir Christensen come to Lanark County, and we arranged a meeting with senior leadership from both of the school boards that serve us. So that developed that personal relationship between the senior leaders and an expert from the IPM. I think it's an important step. One of the things that happened to us, though, is that the senior leadership in one of the school boards changed. So we lost that, and I have egg on my face, and I talked about this when I made a small presentation last November in Ottawa at the conference. We didn't follow up on that enough, and so we lost that personal connection with one of our school boards, and that the impact of that was we lost the connection between our organizations. So it kind of goes back to prove my point that I think you have to stay really connected personally with the right people in the organization if you want to have that organization to organization relationship downstream. Thanks.
Thank you, David, for sharing that experience. If I could just ask a follow-up question. I want to ask two, I guess. One is, can you say a little bit more? I mean, I don't know how feasible it is for IPM expert to meet with each school board. Maybe that is. It's wonderful that that happened. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that or alternatives to that, or just, how you forge that relationship with a school board. Because I think there are some communities maybe that are undertaking this perhaps for the first time. They're making those connections.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there was nobody else in Canada who was really very far along with thinking about the IPM when we were doing that. So Alf Gear lives in North America. He was happy to come and spend time with us,
Right.
and I think he probably still is. So he's a very, accessible guy. So that's where I would start probably.
Mhm.
Um, or I mean, Planet Youth has has a project manager in living in New Brunswick now, and so I mean they have greater human resources in North America than they used to.
Okay.
But I go back to my point. Like I really think the model of treating the school board like a strategic client is an important one. You need to identify who are the key decision makers, who are the influencers, who is there's a concept in my sales training anyway, where there's a person who is the sort of the technical buyer. They have the checklist, and if you don't get every one of those things that are absolutely required, you're out of the game.
Mhm.
Hitting every one of those things doesn't mean you're going to win the sale, but it's it's table stakes. So you have to find out what those are and deal with all of them, and identify a coach within there. Find somebody who is able to help you understand what it is you need to do. It's a lot of work, but that's
Absolutely.
what happens if you're trying to make a sale in the private industry, and I think it's the same thing in the public domain.
Okay, thank you, David. Erica, I see your hand up. Maybe we'll take this as the last comment unless there's any really pressing question, follow-up question. Otherwise, we should probably move on soon, but I'd love to hear what you have to share, Erica.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think there's lots of pieces around the survey piece, and happy to connect with others about the approach that we're taking in Northern BC if there's questions. But I think one of the biggest pieces is we have a lot of data collection in BC already, and there's a little bit of this concern of over surveying youth, that youth continue to be asked for this information. And we've heard from youth in the community we're working with, and Shirley's on the call as well, that, well, what are you actually going to do with this? And what happens if we don't get Stream 2 funding? And there's that is where it's really hard to build the trust with community if you can't commit that this work is going to continue beyond Stream 1. And then also, when you are continuously asking this information, we do have annual surveys that have been done with youth in BC. And how is that information being used? And if you don't see progress, why would youth continue to complete a survey in school if it's not contributing to something meaningful in their community that we're engaged with? But I think over the past year, we've been able to build some more trust through community presence, through having conversations about the goals of doing this. But also, that's a major consideration and why we're not just going to implement another survey that has to be done annually. We have to be thinking strategically about how does this fit into this bigger picture, because that is a piece of the trust from both youth and the wider community within our region.
Right. So I'm hearing ideas there about kind of managing expectations, being transparent, right? About both what you're doing with information you're gathering and what you're able to deliver on. Those are some of the things that you're highlighting, and the value of showing progress or reciprocating, giving back something for the, in response to what you've gathered. Yep, these are some challenging things, and it's a great group of people, I think, for sharing these problems and ideas, because I think you've all thought quite a bit about how to respond. So thank you for that. We'll, as I said, get back to a little more discussion shortly, but we just wanted to take a moment to think about some guiding principles, what these these principles that we want to put forward that might be helpful, and how to practice them to foster trusting relationships. And again, these are principles that we think are valuable for dismantling power and building trust and community engagement. We, first of all, we're really big advocates of 3 principles of a community-based approach to community engagement. Community-driven is the first, right? That there's significant buy-in and direction and initiative coming from those most affected by the issue, so that the initiative is leading to their self-determination. So this is one thing that we invite folks to think about, how much is that forefronted in your engagements. We also invite you to think about the principle of participation and how participatory these engagements are, right? So we can sometimes say we're doing community engagement that's quite narrow, or where the participants are quite passive, as opposed to more actively involved in the design, the implementation, the evaluation of that initiative. So how participatory is it, and who's is part of that initiative? And then the third principle, of course, is just like, how action-oriented are the outcomes of this work, or how action-oriented is the work itself, right? Will it be something that community members can see as producing useful results and helping them to achieve goals? So hopefully these are familiar touchstones or helpful touchstones. As I say, we come back to them again and again in thinking about what's going well or not well in any of our work, and we often find that the strengths and weaknesses kind of fall into these 3 categories. The other 3 touchstones that we wanted to introduce today are more we've thought about as more broader ethical commitments. Relationality and care is. I'm talking too much, honey. I'm going to let you speak to these 3.
I can take care of. Yeah, of course. Thank you, Lisa. Yes, so we also wanted to take a moment to reflect on 3 key ethical principles in community engagement. This work we have adopted from another colleague of Sarah Switzer, another senior researcher at CCBR, and her colleagues. This has been adopted from that work. So these 3 ethical principles are, as you see on the screen: relationality and care, accountability and transparency, and accessibility and equality. And these might overlap with the 3 principles Lisa mentioned as the principles of community based approach. But we wanted to also emphasize on the ethical part of the ethical principles of community engagement. So relationality and care emphasizes the importance of nurturing relationships, both with others, with others and with ourselves. In community engaged work, this means creating conditions that foster mutual care, trust, and respect. It involves practices like honesty, self-grounding, transparency, and collective support, all of which help sustain meaningful and ethical relationships. Accountability and transparency means being clear and open about decisions and being answerable to the communities we work with. It calls for ongoing self-reflection about our roles, intentions, and influence as facilitators. It also challenges us to think creatively about how we can share power and resources in more equitable ways. And finally, accessibility and equality highlights the needs to ensure that everyone has a fair and meaningful opportunity to participate. This principle pushes us to be attentive to power dynamics and to actively remove barriers that limit access and inclusion. So together, all these 3 principles help guide the ethical and thoughtful and impactful community engagement, which, as I said, again, they overlap with the other principles that Lisa mentioned earlier. So for the principles part, so the next step, the next section of this webinar would focus on the practices, but before that, we also wanted to again hear from you about specifically about these principles, if they resonate with you, and then specifically, it's good that you already shared challenges and other insights about the um, about the works that you're doing. So do these principles resonate with you? How can you connect these principles to your project experiences? Or you might find them, you might find other principles resonate, or maybe other conversations might happen. Just this is because the last time we took a little bit more time that we were thinking for the discussion part. We will take a few minutes for this in case you want to share. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. You're adding the principles also there for as a reminder. I also can go back to those slides if needed. And always, please feel free to put your insights in the chat box as well. If you want, I can move back to those slides. Okay, Lisa is putting all the principles there in the screen. Thanks. Specifically regarding the challenges, do you think these principles could help? I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Essentially, the question is here, are these principles, we'd like to know, are they things that you're thinking about already? Do they come into your conversations and, sort of conscious planning and reflection? Are there any that would be maybe missing here that you think are more important?
Yeah, Emily?
Yeah, this is really helpful. And I have to say, this is just my second KDE meeting that I've attended. So I'm absorbing a lot here and really enjoying hearing others' struggles. And I know I'm focusing more on the struggles, not because we're not having lots of successes, but it's just really helpful to discuss some of the tricky bits. But one thing I'm thinking about is the transparency piece. And so when we're going to schools and we're working with them to build trust and to get them on board to do the survey, they know we've received, government funding for this. But one thing I think is important, and I'm curious if others have thought about this, is just being transparent that there's not a whack of cash sitting there right now for youth interventions. And we have had some success fundraising, and a lot of that's going to come later. But I think I'm just curious how others have dealt with like that transparency around, how funding is being directed and what funding actually sits in the bank for the intervention phase, and how any guidance about how to be transparent around that.
That's a great question. I'll put it on the slide as well. Maybe Shirley, do you want to jump up next? And then we can also give people an opportunity to respond to these questions as they come up.
Well, in the Robson Valley, we've addressed the question. This was not what I was going to comment on, but we've addressed the money question by just being very upfront about the reality that, we are being supported to figure out how we will access sustainable funding. That's part of the process. And that while there are, various smaller amounts that we can use to help try different things, give people a direct experience of, different kinds of spaces, kind of like proof of concept sort of things where, we're proving to our young people and our less young people that when you provide the space and the resources for young people to come together and have some freedom and autonomy in deciding what kinds of things they want to do, that they are pretty happy to do that. And it doesn't require, nobody's complaining about not having alcohol or, what have you. So that, I mean, just being very upfront about it, that, yeah, we're going to try a few things here just so that to help build that engagement and momentum. But, big picture, we're talking about how can we also find some sustainable funding sources. The thing that I wanted to mention, which is kind of connected to that, I guess, that are sort of, I think, woven through these principles are that it's really important to consider relevance, like, depending on context, that's kind of part of the community-driven piece. Whatever is happening needs to be, as much as possible, engaging. He wants to sit through another meeting for, no apparent reason. So that's kind of like, I guess, that action-oriented piece. And then it's really important to be reflexive. So learning from, everything's a learning experience. And so how do you take the learning that is happening? Like, what are the stories of, why people are coming to something, why they're choosing to participate, what their experience of that participation was, and where they could envision things going next. So being very reflexive, so taking things in and then like applying it back into the project. And there needs to be responsivity. So, having those mechanisms in place that people are able to get a hold of someone who might be interested in having conversations about, oh yeah, there's this other thing that I thought of, or like this question came up and we'd like to do something about it. So kind of relevant, engaging, reflexive, and responsive, I think, are 4 pieces that, and I mean, like, food is obviously part of that as well.
Can be part of the the engagement for sure. Thanks.
It is great. Another four principles. I think we are. Oh, we have Crystal. I think
Yeah.
Emily's hand. I'm not sure if that's from the previous one, but I think Crystal. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to speak a little bit to the funding question. I agree 100% with Shirley, like that sustainable sources of funding. And in Planet Youth Calgary, it's really interesting because we have like our 4 communities and then we have the Indigenous parallel. And only one of the communities is like really anchored to funding. And we haven't gotten our survey responses yet. So we haven't done the preventative intervention, but we wanted to start to include community. And the other 3 communities were able to sort of remove those silos. The people at the coalitions came and they were actually able to do awareness and interventions through partnerships with each other into community. And so that's kind of how we sort of manage that funding question. Is there are things that you can do that don't require like $50,000, and having those people on your coalitions, like it was really kind of fun to see how they developed these interventions. And then it also spoke to what Shirley was saying, was that sustainability piece, because funding is not going to be there for 20 to 25 years. So it's a way to actually start figuring out some of those solutions that are community driven, and where the community is coming together to find sort of those resources in other ways other than just a pocket of money. So I just wanted to add that. I forget who was asking, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Crystal. We are a little bit late in the time for the slides. So these are all great conversation insights. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, I'll move forward with the rest of the slides, and then we will have opportunities to have conversations.
I just need to say one really quick thing, Hani, because the concepts of relevance, reflexivity, responsiveness came up. We'll share a resource with all of you afterwards that also speaks to another set of principles. It's really geared around intercultural research engagement, knowledge creation, and so on. But think you might find those resonate with some of what you've all shared here and could also be a useful reference point. Go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. So now we want to shift into some practices in trust building and community engagement. So we have chosen. So as you may know, there are lots of resources and conversations about how to build trust. We've the foundations of trust. And specifically the 13 behaviors have been one of the ways of looking at how to build trust. So we've selected to have conversation today on this one, and then unpack a little bit of the 13 behaviors, and later we will try to bridge these behaviors with the principles that we already talked about. So to inspire, based on this, the foundation of trust, based on this resource, to inspire trust, we need to have two things: character and competence. We need to think about these two things: the character and competence, and then. Yeah, sorry. And because even if you trust someone's character, you might not trust them with the task, they are inexperienced in. So because of that, the competence and characters has been separated. Character. So these two elements, they have four cores. So character, two cores: intent, and which means the agenda, and integrity, which means being whole and congruent, which is the foundation somehow, as you see in the tree metaphor in the background. And then the two core elements of competence are results, which mean the outcomes plus the methods that are being used, and the capabilities, which is a combination of talents, attitudes, skills, and knowledge and style. But the main part we want to focus on in this webinar are the 13 behaviors in the right part of the slide, as you see. And it's a kind of spectrum that flows from character to competence. I'll unpack. We have 3 more slides to unpack each of these 13 behaviors to learn more about them, to have more conversation about them. So we start with the character, which, as I said, involves intent and integrity. So first behavior is show loyalty, give credit freely where it's due, and speak about others as if they were present. Right the wrongs, meaning that acknowledge your mistakes quickly and go the extra mile to make amends. Be transparent, be open and real about the facts. Show respect, treat everyone with respect and care, the way you'd like to be treated. And talk straight, meaning that be clear and truthful about your thoughts, agenda, and stance on issues. The other 5 behaviors which fall under competence are: produce results, deliver the right results consistently, on time, and within budget. Keep improving, continually upgrade your skills and capabilities via formal plus informal feedback. Confront reality, meaning that share the facts, be it good or bad, and address tough issues directly. Establish clear, realistic expectations from the start, and be accountable, meaning that hold both yourself and others accountable for agreed behaviors and results. Yeah, so I was remembering somebody was talking about the people were asking about the results and how this is going to be used. There are three behaviors which are these are common among character and competence. Are listen first before you speak. First, seek to understand others by listening fully with your ears, eyes, heart, and mind. Meet commitments, keep promises, and follow through on all commitments. Extend trust. It means apply smart trust by extending trust conditionally to those who are still earning it, and extending trust generously to those who've proven themselves trustworthy. So these were the 13 behaviors behaviors to build trust. We've put together a chart to bridging it all together, bridging the principles that we shared with practices. That I'll let Lisa walk us through them.
Thank you. We want to leave plenty of time for discussion, so we won't spend too much time on this slide, but we just thought it would be a helpful way of thinking about how the principles and those practices or behaviors come together. And so, what does it mean to be community driven? That means we're also going to be having to practice extending trust, meeting our commitments, and so on, right? To be effectively participatory, we have to also be listening, showing respect, etc. And so we've tried to create a bit of a scheme here that might be a helpful kind of reference or like checklist, something you could look at and think about, are we doing this and how is this working? And we've put, of course, those 3 ethical commitments at the center because we feel that they permeate the behaviors, or they should be represented in those bullets. And I would just add that I think accessibility and equity, we want to highlight that or forefront that a little bit more, as it didn't come out of this other research. We found these ideas so helpful, the breakdown of these 13 behaviors, but accessibility and equity is something that we have to be thinking about in terms of who's really present and participating in those conversations to begin with, and what are the barriers to participating in that, who's being heard at the outset, who's considered part of the community when we're trying to be community driven, who's being acted upon or being asked to act, etc. So that's the kind of connection between these concepts that we wanted to forefront for you. And the idea of synthesizing all of that is just to give you something to kind of stimulate thought, reflection, and conversation as we move you into some breakout rooms for conversation that is, I don't know if you want to advance the slide, honey. Yeah. So we're going to say it's 2:05. We were hoping for about 20 minutes, which I think we can still do, but that would be just, I think we need to have about 15 minutes in discussion and then 5 minutes to come back and share to the group as a whole. And essentially we wanted to invite you to discuss if there are other principles or practices for building trust that you'd like to exchange or consider, and to discuss what in your experience is challenging about living up to such principles and practices, and how to troubleshoot or navigate those challenges together. So love to hear when you come back, if you could just sort of elect someone within your small group to take notes and have maximum 2-minute share back, just kind of highlights of what you learned from each other, that we can share with the whole room about how to build trust further. If there are any questions, we're here, but yeah. Go ahead, Ani.
No, it's good to, if anyone has any questions, I was going to stop share and then do the breakout rooms.
Yeah, I can put the instructions and the questions in the chat as well, but otherwise Hani will just move you into the breakout rooms. Hi there.
Hello.
So, let's see, do we have everyone back and settled? Thank you so much for sitting with one another, introducing yourselves, and sharing. Somewhat vulnerable, but I was able to listen in on one conversation anyway. I think it was helpful. So yeah, quick share back. If we can just move through maybe breakout room. There's going to be 3 people speaking, so I'm just going to let you jump in rather than calling on anyone. Who would like to start us off? Don't be shy.
I can go
I'll
first.
start.
Oh.
I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. We're chasing. So, my personal comment, we didn't actually say this in the meeting, but there's a lot of stuff in what you talked about. So it's hard to, in a short breakout room, to do it. A lot of it is, and I'm not arguing against the validity of it, but there's some pretty simple concepts. I mean, I have trouble retaining all those things, but be honest, be transparent, say what say what you mean and mean what you say is kind of like the summary of it. But we did talk about thinking about that continuum of empowerment. If you're going to go all the way to the right of it, if you're going to say, like one of the steps is community goal setting. If you're going to delegate to the community to set goals, then that community also has to be accountable for helping make those goals achievable. And that wasn't spoken about in our earlier discussion. So we, in the case of Lanark County, we have a coalition which is receiving some funding because we're a Stream 2 recipient, and we're funding the coalition. There's a collaborative governance decision-making capability there, or model there, because there's accountability associated with that. When we're talking about the larger community, it's more sort of inform and get feedback than delegate decision-making responsibility, because I can't hold 66,000 people accountable for a decision that they make. I can ask them for their input, and if they really are, if the community doesn't like what's going on, we're certainly going to take that into account. But we have to present something fairly tangible in order to get reasonable feedback. And I think that's a distinction that's worthwhile talking about in the context of the IPM. And I think others in our group are kind of nodding their heads around that, but I'll let them jump in if they think I'm wrong here.
Thank you for that. Yeah, very good thought. The more you move towards setting goals and being empowering, the more shared the responsibility is. Absolutely. The more deeply collaborative you have to be, and there has to be this extension of trust that is multi-directional, right? Okay, thanks for bringing that into the conversation. Who else did I see raised a hand? Was it?
I didn't raise a hand, but I'm happy to go for our group. I will say we went very off track of the questions, mostly just the excitement of being able to talk amongst BC-based projects about the work that's been happening. I think it really, jumping onto what David said about like the collaboration piece and working together on this, that there's we were talking about it more between projects, the collaboration, but I think at the community level as well, that it depends a little bit on the, who is holding the funding, but there is that accountability piece of, thinking for my project that I'm supporting specifically with our other co-leads is we're a regional organization, but like we are there to support the community. We're not coming in and telling people what to do. There is the collaboration that they need to develop ownership over it as well, and that accountability piece, that this is something that, they, in our case, had to apply to an expression of interest and demonstrate we are committed to doing this work, and these are the pieces that it's, you know, it may not have been the whole community at that point in time, but enough people or community leaders stepping forward to say that we want to begin this work and we want to do that, that I think reinforces that development of trust, is you need those people on the ground that have those relationships. Whereas the other project in BC, they are more grassroots and not as top down in the selection of a community. But yeah, so I think just coming back to similar themes of that collaboration and accountability that the other group discussed.
Thank you for that. It's really important to think about the practices in terms of financial sharing and maybe terms of reference, right? More concrete agreements. And we're gonna have one more share back and then we'll just wrap up real quickly, recognizing that we're almost at time. Shirley, did you wanna go ahead and share your comments?
Sure. We talked a bit about the challenges of making gatherings and the project just in general accessible to young people, to coalition members who aren't able to attend meetings during the day, how to include people who are not yet as comfortable with English. I was talking about how one potential avenue for helping to address some of those things is just providing a really low bar to engagement with our local coalition. I recognize and celebrate whenever anyone is willing to get emails from me, and that's the ask is, are you willing to get emails? And then, you know, from there, sometimes something is interesting to someone, you know, they'll send an email if there's a connection or an opportunity. That's how invitations to the different meetings and gatherings tend to go out. And so then we have people attending, you know, more in person or online gatherings because they're on that list. But always just being really clear that, yeah, willing to get emails. And then if you're going to read them, that's even better. Like, thank you. I really appreciate that because I don't read all my emails. And so if people are, you know, taking that on, then that's a lot. And then as much as possible, trying to provide recordings. I try and put all of our information on a local page that I maintain. And then we were also talking about considering different ways of engaging with school staff. So I myself work in the schools here in Valemount. I'm the school counselor, and I know that lots of people who work in schools are really interested in being part of projects like this, but they don't always necessarily know about them because sometimes information can get hung up at an admin level or at a board office level. And so there are, you know, in British Columbia anyways, our union here, we have professional development structures that operate through the union, and there, you know, a lot of this does fit with professional development for teachers, particularly when you're mid-career and you're looking for kind of some things to jazz up your practice, your pedagogy a bit. So just kind of considering potential other avenues, and then with support staff as well, they also have their own unions. So just like investigating some of those pieces, not as like sneaking around behind anyone's backs, because you definitely want your district partners to be partners, but just like as one more avenue and of access and point of contact.
Awesome. Thank you, Shirley. A lot of good ideas there about how to make things more deeply accessible and how to access key points and relationships as well. So thank you. I'll just say quickly, we really appreciate the expertise gathered here. If you have any thoughts or questions after our gathering, we welcome you to reach out to us. Do visit the website. We are also offering certificate programming addressing these kinds of issues in community engagement and other related matters. So we hope to have a chance to talk with some of you again in the future. And thank you to KDE. I'll just pass it back if you want to say any last comments.
Super. Thank you, Lisa and Hani. We really appreciate you sharing all this information. Really useful. Especially as projects are developing the relationships and building them with communities. So really appreciate all the ways that you demonstrated to cultivate engagement and to build trust. And also really appreciate you sharing foundational frameworks and then weaving and layering touchstones and principles and strategies to foster and strengthen relationships in community. So thank you so much for that. I want to take a moment as well to introduce a new Hub team member. And I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Sarah, to take a moment to introduce you before we wrap up with a couple of announcements.
Thanks, Alice. Hi, everyone. I've had a chance to meet some of you, but I just wanted to quickly say that I am the new Engagement and Learning Manager with the KDE Hub, and I will be supporting the YSUP project communities. So if there's anything that you need or want to get in touch with the KDE Hub, I will be your point of contact, and I'll just pop my email in the group chat just while Alice finishes off some final announcements that we'd love for you to stick around and hear. So I look forward to really working with all of you and getting to know your work.
Super. Thanks, Sarah. And we're enjoying having you on as part of our team. I really appreciate that. So a few announcements for you. So our next YSUP community webinar is coming up on Tuesday, July 8th from 1 until 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So in this webinar, our very own Dr. Katie Cook will present the survey alignment tool. So we've had questions about surveys already, some discussion. So there's some information coming for you to present demographic questions to ask on surveys to really offer inclusive response options. An email invitation will be coming your way tomorrow, and please join us for that webinar. We also have another webinar coming up, lots of great things coming your way on June 17th from 1 until 2 p.m. Eastern Time with Dr. Heather Arpana, a senior researcher at the Center for Surveillance and Applied Research with the Public Health Agency of Canada. And they'll be presenting a conceptual framework for monitoring substance-related harms with insights on consideration for data collection and using informed decision-making. So the link is in the chat. Awesome, thank you. And we have some new modules for you from our implementation learning series. That's our online learning series. There's units 4 and 5 have been developed around sustaining and scaling interventions and delivering and refining them. So this may be of interest to you, and feel free. Hopefully there's a link in the chat coming your way. And before you go, we'd love to hear your feedback. So stay in touch with us on either X or LinkedIn. But we have 2 questions that will pop up when the webinar ends. Please give us feedback, always looking to improve what we're doing here, and we love hearing from you. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you to CCBR for hosting your talk today, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.